Second. I can say. Okay, I have some problems sharing my screen, but anyway, I can inform you that we have more than 50 participants in this seminar. This is a very good number from countries all over Europe: Italy, Slovakia, Turkey, Spain, Belgium, Netherlands, Portugal, UK, France, Austria, and some more. And also we have participants outside Europe. Just to introduce some practicalities of the webinars, the idea is all of you will be in an unmute background noise and echoes, and presenters will share screen when giving their presentations. You can click the icon on participants on the bottom of the screen and see the list of participants. We are in the webinar, and also you can click the chat button at the bottom of the screen, and you can use this chat all along the webinar to provide feedback, ask questions, suggestions, proposal, and all of this. And at the end of the webinar, we have a block of questions and answers, and we will try to address all your feedbacks and comments. We have distributed a background document together with the agenda, with the basics of the climate adapt, of case studies in climate adapt. So I just want to mention here in this introduction that climate adapt, the new climate adapt with the new layout and the new structure was launched last January. After a year of intensive work dealing with this aspect of restructuring the platform and redesigning the layout, taking into account the results of the climate adapt evaluation. And so, yeah, we have this renovated platform now. In this webinar, we have, let's say, several objectives, but including disseminate the basic of the case study. We designed the webinar identifying two specific case studies to provide more details, specifically regarding from a point of view of the developers of the case study and the local implemented actors of the case study. Then another objective, of course, is to promote the use of climate adapt and to discuss the value of these elements of the platform that, according with the evaluation, is one of the most valuable elements and most visited sections in the platform. So we will finalize discussing potential further developments for case studies in climate adapt. So I have some technical problems sharing my screen, but first slide was the agenda of the webinar, and just to briefly summarize it, we are going to start with an overview by Emiliano Rainieri from the European Topic Center of Climate Change Adaptation regarding the basic of case studies. Then we will move to a presentation on a specific case study, the Sun Motor by Chiara Castellari, the developer of this case study. Then we will have a presentation from a local perspective on a case study in the Basque Country in Spain regarding a urban infrastructure strategy. And then we will finish with this block or these sections for comments, feedbacks, question, answer, and things like that. So I will invite now. Let's see. We invite Emiliano. I'm going to share the role of presenter to Emiliano. I invite him to share his screen and to start with this basic of climate adaptation study. Emiliano, please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Jose. I'm sharing the screen. And please tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Just trying to control the presentation. Okay. Yes, this presentation will provide an overview of what are meant to be the climate adapt case studies. Sorry, just try to move this. Okay, they are meant to provide a description of adaptation measures that are already implemented or being implemented in Europe to increase resilience and adaptation capacity to both the extreme weather events and the low onset events which are somehow affected by climate change. They are quite diverse. We will provide a snapshot overview of some of them. Diverse in terms of the sectors they covered and the climate change impacts they cope with. And during my presentation, you'll find a number of images taken from the case studies which are currently published in Climate Adapt. Here, for example, you can see the master plan for coastal protection in Flanders and the measures that the city of Stuttgart in Germany has put in place to combat the heat island effect and the effect of heat waves in the city. So the main objectives of climate adapt case studies is to show that adaptation is occurring in Europe, in particular at the local and subnational scales, and provide information that can increase awareness on these initiatives and even on what is possible to do. By the hand, also to support policy and decision makers and provide inspiration for new adaptation activities in other contexts. We define a set of criteria to select case studies to be published in Climate Adapt, and you can see those criteria here summarized. The first three, which are highlighted in green here, are those considered most important. There must be a clear link to climate change adaptation, which means that we are very much interested also in case studies that deals with current variability of the climate system and in particular extreme events. But it's fundamental for our approach that case studies also deals with a long-term perspective, which is a key component of climate change adaptation. Of course, this also implies that it might imply that a number of co-benefits are produced by measures which are put in place for to increase adaptation capacity to climate change. I already mentioned that the case studies shall describe measures which are really implemented on the ground or are being implemented on the ground. So this is to say that, for example, adaptation strategies and plans are not suitable to be framed as climate adapt case studies, which doesn't mean that we are not interested in this experience, but this could be hosted in climate adapt as a different typology of knowledge, not as a case study. But of course, all the measures that come out from the implementation of a strategy or a plan are really matching these important criteria for case study selection. And the third one is accessibility to more detailed information, which is strategically important to provide the users with the possibility of knowing more with more detail. You can see listed other criteria. Some of them are more used by ourselves to provide a balanced distribution of case studies among the European regions and the sectors and the climate change impact. And we'll come back on this later in my presentation. But it's very important that the case studies are recent and alive. So not only we're not very much interested in project-based experience which end with the end of the project. And they decided to leave out cases of maladaptation, so we're focusing on good practices. Okay, there are two ways to browse case studies in Climate Adapt. One is the Climate Adapt database, which provides access to all the items which are stored in Climate Adapt, not only case studies, but different typologies of items, including, for example, projects, reports, guidelines, quite a wide variety of items, and the database can be browsed according to a number of selecting filters, but also through a sort of geographic interface, the so-called Climate Adapt Case Study tool. You can see here on the right side of the slide the snapshot of this tool, where you can combine the same criteria of the database with the spatial selection criteria, and so refine according also to spatial criteria your selection. The current collection includes 91 case studies included in Climate Adapt, and as you can see from the graph, this has grown since 2014 to the current situation, and that's a progressive work. We are still working on developing other case studies, so by the end of the year we are expecting somehow to be closer to the imagined number of 100 case studies. There has been quite consistent work in the first years, 2014 and 2015, to initiate the database, and that's why you can see that almost half of the current collection of case study was developed in those years. Just a few examples, then my colleague Chiara will present in more detail one of the case study, and the same will be for the Vitoria case study in Spain. Just so 3 examples to make you more aware of what case studies are in Climate Adapt. That's a case study taken from Glasgow. So it's an integrated approach to catchment management to mitigate the flood risk. And the challenge is actually the mitigation of flooding of some of specific areas in Glasgow due to the flooding caused by the white cart water and old house burn in the city. And they implemented a combination of measures on the area upstream the city, on the drainage basin, for the construction of flood storage areas. And then the construction of walls and embankments in a selected part of the rivers throughout the city. So you can see in the picture in the middle the flood storage area upstream the city, and on the right side, the figure on the right side, you can see the embankment along the white cart water. The second example is taken from Germany. I just mentioned it before. Is in Stuttgart. And the objective here is to facilitate air exchange in the city to cope with both decrease in air quality and the effect of heat waves in the city. So the measures which have been implemented are based on urban planning, which includes provision of construction of new residential, new buildings, new infrastructure along the existing ventilation corridors. So limiting also the urban sprawl and expansion of the green areas, including also green roofs, as you can see here in the images of the slide. The third example is coming from Italy. It's quite different. It's a different context. It's very much dealing with water management in groundwater system. The objective was to restore the natural dynamics of the aquifer recharge in an area close to Vicenza, in north of Italy, to cope also with the increase in water demand and the variability of rainfall regimes in the area, which says that in summer, projections for the summer by 2100 are expected for a decrease in precipitation. So here they constructed a so-called forested infiltration area system, which is basically a network of canals bringing water from a river, in this case the Brenta River, when this water is available in excess, to a forested area, and which can improve the natural dynamics for the recharge of the aquifer. As we said that we aim to have a balanced distribution of case studies by sectors, impacts, and geographic distribution. We yearly perform a coverage and gap analysis, and you can see here the case study, current case study distribution by sectors in the first graph on the left. And where you can see there is 5 sectors which are pretty more covered than others, and then there is a quite homogeneous distribution with one major, and I would say a unique major gap about marine and fisheries, about the marine and fisheries sector. In our analysis, which is extended to the overall database of Climate Adapt, we have categorized gaps in the 3 categories you can see here in the slide. So we think that this kind of gap is mainly related to the missing of scientific and practical evidence, and this is even supported by the evidence of the Horizon 2020 Climate Fish project, which is still running and which aims to provide knowledge on climate change adaptation in the sector of fisheries, both in terms of in the sector of fisheries and aquaculture. And even in that case, they really came out with this important message of missing practical evidence of climate change adaptation in the sector. When we come to the impacts, it's not surprising that flooding is the impact most represented, and extreme temperature is the second. While the major gap here is related to ice and snow-related impacts, and again, this is not surprising because this is quite concentrated in a few areas in Europe, the mountain areas probably, and a few others, and also here we can probably have the effect of gap category 1 typology of gap. Moving to the geographic distribution, where we have assigned to each case studies one or more transnational regions that we just defined by the Interreg programs. The type regions you see represented here, and as you can see, most of the case studies are dealing with the Northwest Europe region, but there is a good coverage of, I would say, quite all of the region, at least in the Baltic Sea, while the less covered regions are the Adriatic Ionian, the Balkan Mediterranean, and the Northern Mediterranean Arctic. Considering also the Adriatic Ionian and Balkan Mediterranean are new regions defined by the according to the current performance period of the Interreg program. There is also the overall ambition to provide at least one case study for each of the EEA member countries or associated countries, and you can see here the countries, the case studies by country, and there are still a number which is not large, but there are still some countries which are not represented by any case study. We should underline that this is not a sort of grouping of countries, because we are not really providing any assessment of the by the case studies of the country capacity in developing climate change adaptation. But definitely the overall aim is to provide examples for all the countries in the way they reproduce, the overall collection reproduce the variability of the different countries within Europe. Again, in terms of the distribution by the scale of implementation of the measures, is definitely not surprising that most of the case studies deal with local scale, and a good number also with regional ones, which are the scales where real implementation of measures normally occur. It's very low the number of transnational case studies, as only 3 of them which are dealing with this transnational dimension, which we really would like to improve in number in the collection of case studies of climate adaptation. Indeed, the process of case study development is quite, I would say, rich, probably complex, but definitely rich. Ideally, there can be, if there is a user that would like to share his own experience, he or she can directly submit the case studies for the sharing your information function available in Climate Adapt. But the case study elaboration, as I said, is quite complex. It's not straightforward. So we do provide as ETC/CCA support to those who are interested in sharing their initiatives. So the process will see that a user normally provides short abstract to the case study coordinator of the ETC/CCA, myself in this case, and based on the abstract we decide whether is relevant going on with this case study. And then there is the development of a first draft, and then we can, in this case, concretely support the external user in drafting the case study till to the finalization and final approval by the EEA of the case study and the offline version of the case study, which is then published in Climate Adapt. Here you can see the overall structure of the case study. There is an abstract, which is the text visible in the slide here. There is only the outline, of course, below on the Climate Adapt web page. There are also the information relevant for the other elements of the outline, so challenges, objectives, what kind of adaptation options are implemented in the case, a detailed description of solutions, and then other additional details on stakeholder participation, success limiting factors, cost and benefits information, legal aspect, implementation time and lifetime, and last but not least, information about contacts and where to find specific, more detailed information for website and other services. We also include pictures to provide visual information about the case study, which we think are very good in inspiring people. Coming quite to the conclusion, last year in 2018, the EEA and the ETC/CCA worked on the elaboration of the report sharing adaptation information across Europe, which provides an evaluation of Climate Adapt based on internal and external internal mechanism and external survey, and this report was also aimed to support the overall evaluation of the EU adaptation strategy. In this work, we developed a survey asking to the local contacts for the case studies which were at that time relevant to climate adapt a series of information through the survey. So out of 80 case studies, we got 27 responses, if I remember well. Here you can see the answer to the question why more detailed information on case studies were requested to the local contacts. And you can see that there is a range of diverse interest by people which contacted the local contacts for more detailed information to develop a strategic policy document, to use case studies in awareness raising, and to study for research purpose or in the planning process, and other are mentioned in the slide. There were also others which we didn't pre-identified in the survey. For example, some people use the case studies in training, and other also to organize field trip in one of the case study locations. So coming to my last slide, what next? We usually define our work plan, okay, the work plan, also the case studies. So we are now considering what to do for the next year, and here are some of the ideas. We would like to have your feedback on those ideas. Improve case study dissemination. Last year we published this booklet you see on the bottom of the slide, about 10 examples of case studies to distribute at conference, workshop, or any events, but there might be many others. Ideas to improve dissemination. Close the remaining gap. There are two major ones we mentioned during the presentation, the one about marine fishery and the second on ice and snow-related impacts. There is definitely the need to update all the case studies. There is quite a bunch of case studies coming from 2014 and 2015, so 4 years passed, and there is the need to update those case studies. Will be very good to collect structural information on the long-term effects of implemented measures. If there is evidence that some of the measures which have been put in place and concretely implemented have produced real benefits in terms of adaptation to climate extremes or to climate change. And definitely continue developing closer collaboration with external submitters, which are our way to know much more about initiatives going around Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emiliano, for your presentation. The sound sometimes wasn't very good, but I think you have provided a very good overview of the case studies in Spain and Netherland, through the revision of the main basic criteria, the structure, the distribution, and so on. Now I would invite Chiara Castellani to present specific examples of case studies in the Sun model in Netherlands. So please, Chiara, you have the role of presenter, and you can go on with your presentation. Try to keep the micro in a constant distance, maybe get a better sound.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to show you this case study, Sand Motor, that has been recently added to the Climate Adapt platform as an example of coastal adaptation to fight coastal erosion in the perspective of increasing sea level rise and storm surges. The case study is located in the Netherlands along the Delftland coast in the south of Holland, and was developed also through the collaboration of a local contact from Delta RES. Sand Motor is also new as a mega nourishment intervention, since it is a big intervention concentrated in one single year, of nourishment, and it was implemented as a pilot project as an innovative solution, alternative to traditional sand nourishment intervention that had been carried out in the region along the coast since the 90s. The intervention was carried out in 2011 by the National Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management Works, also with the support of the province of Holland. And the main objective was to preserve the coastline and at the reference position set in the Dutch policy, and to protect against flooding, and also as secondary objective to create a new space for recreational activities and for natural development. Sand motor is an example of building with nature approach because this intervention uses natural processes to achieve different targets of coastal management. And several challenges gave an impulse to the development of this intervention, and especially the past trend and the regional future projection of sea level rise would require increasing volume of sand, and this suggested to test an innovative intervention alternative to traditional nourishment intervention with a lifetime longer than traditional nourishment intervention. And so this intervention should serve as a buffer against sea level rise, flooding, and mitigating also negative effects of storm surges. This idea of mega nourishment started since 2006. And after a planned survey, this solution was selected, and this implied the deposit of a huge volume of sand in a single operation, allowing that natural agencies such as wind, waves, and currents spread the sand along the coast in a natural way, and with a lifetime longer than traditional nourishment initiatives. The intervention passed the environmental impact assessment and was carried out in 2011. As objectives were mainly the preservation of the beach and the coast, but also, as previously mentioned, nature conservation, creating new space for habitat, and creating space for leisure activities, and also it was the opportunity to create new knowledge, research and innovation, because it was established as a pilot project. Some figures of the intervention are here reported. It involved huge volume of sand, 21 million cubic meters of sand that was extracted from the North Sea, about 10 kilometers offshore. The sand was deposited along the coast in a hook-shaped peninsula of about 128 hectares, and the intervention was complemented by 2 foreshore nourishment operations to strengthen the efficiency of sand distribution. And the change of this new peninsula is changing, is continuously changing, following the drivers of wind, waves, and currents, and this required strict monitoring efforts that is still ongoing. The main success factor is surely the long-term protection of the coast, compared to traditional intervention, and also the possibility of meeting multiple targets, so not only the coastal preservation, but also nature expansion and new space for recreation. And this creates national and international interest to possibly export also these case studies to other locations. A negative factor was the formation of temporary dangerous situation related to the continuously changing shape of the peninsula and the formation of dangerous currents, especially for bathing. But this was solved by a special control by the coastal guards and specific information to the public. And finally, the intervention cost was about 70 million euros, funded by the Ministry of Infrastructure and the province of South Holland. And the first complete assessment that has been reported in a specific report that is available online indicates success in coastal protection, meeting the initial local objective. And this also created knowledge on the coastal system functioning. And the lifetime estimated for this project is about 20 years, and so this is considered a clear advantage of the intervention. And finally, new results on the efficiency of this intervention will be available in upcoming years because the monitoring is still ongoing, and this will allow a complete economic evaluation of the intervention compared to traditional ones, and also to overall environmental benefits of the intervention. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Chiara, for this vision of this emblematic project, the Stand Motor in Netherlands. It's a good example of an ambitious project facing multiple changes in the coastal areas, and with good results and good resources also to develop it. Thank you very much. Now we are going to move to the last presentation. I'm going to give the floor to Aitor from the Environmental Studies Center of Vitoria-Gasteiz. Unfortunately, yes, it was foreseen that Andrés Alonso was also present a short briefing from a more, let's say, political perspective or administrative perspective, but he has some medical problems, and in fact he's in hospital today. So Aitor will provide technical details of this case study of Vitoria-Gasteiz. Aitor, can you?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. I'm going to share my screen because Aitor is in Germany currently and has some limitations.
Yeah, poor Wi-Fi connection, let's say.
Yeah, so I will try to share my screen, and then I will...
yeah, just to avoid delays, I think it's better to do that. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Wait a moment. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, wait a moment.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I will present several experiences in Vitoria regarding climate change adaptation. Let's move, please. First of all, I will give you some facts about Vitoria-Gasteiz. We are the capital of the Basque Country. We host 250,000 people. We were European Green Capital in 2012. One of the main reasons was the high quality and surface of green areas in the city. summing up to 45 square meters per inhabitant, including the green belt that you can see in the image in the bottom that was started 25 years ago. Let's move, please. Next slide, Jose.
Yes.
Yeah, this is our municipality. It's the largest one in the Basque Country. 1/3 of our surface is the city itself. Another 1/3 is the agricultural land surrounding the city, those in yellow. And the last third is native forest in the mountains that is in a very well-preserved status. Interestingly, our city is located in the transitional area between the Mediterranean and the temperate weather. Because of that, it's a biodiversity hotspot. We are hosting 2 Ramsar areas and 4 Nature 2000 areas within the city. When it comes to the climate change, we are expecting an increase in temperatures, but also, and I will give more focus in my presentation on that, change in the rainfall regime are foreseen. Apart from a lower total amount of precipitation in the summertime, we are expecting more extreme events, so more flood events also in our city. Yeah, next one. This is our water system. The city lies above an aquifer. You can see in blue in the top left image. And in the past, it was crossed by streams, let's say small rivers from the southern mountains. But more than 1 century ago, they were buried underground, becoming part of the sewage system in those pipes that are crossing the city. So they were integrated within the same pipe. And those, as you can imagine, that caused flooding in the connection areas. And also, let's go to the next slide. In the main river in the north of the city that is called Zadorra River. The flood in the image is in the north part of the city. That's mostly created because we have a large water reservoirs in the north part of the municipality for drinking water. And when the snow is melting, they have to open the dams because it's reaching the maximum level, and that creates floods. But apart from that, in the other 3 circles, those are the connections of the urban rivers, let's say, with the sewage system. And as you can imagine, in the moment of the extreme rainfall events, there are floods in that connection point. Apart from that, another problem is the overflow of polluted water, not treated waters, in the wastewater treatment plants that are down left in the image. And when there are too many water, as you can imagine, we have to release water, non-treated water, to the river. Next one. That was the situation 25 years ago. In the last decades, we have been making actions to overcome these issues. Number one, for example, is just creating artificial river beds, so diverting the rivers from the sewage system to an artificial river bed that goes on surface towards the river without going to the wastewater treatment plant. The second intervention is incomplete, so we also recover a riverbed in the city center, but still we couldn't make it to the river, so it's just recovering in more or less half of the surface. But something that has to be finalized in the next years. The third one, regarding the main river in the north, is just enlarging or recovering the natural floodplain to allow this surface to be flooded, as you can see in the images. And the last one, where I will give more stress, is the recovery of a functional wetland that is called Salburua wetland, that is on the map, and you will see more details in the next slide. Yeah, nowadays this is a Ramsar site, a Natura 2000 site, and it's let's say the jewel of the crown of our green belt. It was the second intervention, but the most famous one, and you will see in the next slide how it was 25 years ago. So on the image in the top left, that is a reconstruction, because there are no satellite images of the wetland as it was in the past, but that was a reconstruction based on sediments and an ancient map. What we had in the 80s, when we started the recovery process in urban green infrastructure and nature-based solution framework, was just a remnant patch of natural forest. You see in the big picture in the middle, just in the middle, that was the only relic forest in the area. After that, Well, at that moment, as you can see also the other images, this was pretty an abandoned place. It was desiccated more than 100 years ago for crop production, but it was abandoned at the end. And in the 80s, it was just a place where uncontrolled dumping or illegal housing for urban allotments, illegal ones, was taking place. But the interesting thing is also that this place is nearby to an industrial area where there was floods, as you can imagine, because the rivers were connected to the sewage system at that specific place. So we started 25 years ago with the intervention. The first thing we did was to divert the rivers from the sewage system. It's the number 2 in the map, you can see. Also, we make some works to prepare the land for the water that came again from the river and especially from the aquifer. So just removing dams and barriers to the water, and we just let the system recover by itself. And after 25 years ago, we can say there was a success. The fauna and the flora recover without introduction. We only make an introduction with years to control vegetation, but the other is natural flora and fauna. And as you can see in the big picture, these are an image from 2003, the largest floods of the last 20 years. And in green, you see the industrial area that didn't get any economic loss, no damage due to the flooding. In the past, it was always severe damage by the floodings because all the water was retained in the wetland, top left, and also in the floodplains of the river in the bottom part of the image. So that's an example of a nature-based solution that is not only increasing biodiversity, ecosystem services, but also preventing floods in the urban fabric. Let's move to the next one, please. I will see just one slide of another intervention. The first one was a park in the green belt in the periphery of the city. This is in the inner city, like what we call the inner belt. So this is a connector, a main avenue crossing the city from south to north. It's called Gasteiz Avenue. In the past, it was just concrete for private car use, traffic lanes and parking lanes, as you see in the gray image in the top and the one on the left. But we implement here an integrated intervention, taking into account not only ecosystem services, green infrastructure, as the recovered riverbed that you see in the image, but also sustainable mobility. So just removing parking lanes, integrating tram, public transport, and at the end getting a higher quality public space for the citizen and for nature. That's something we want to replicate in the rest of the city. It costs a lot of money, so we need to invest in the next decades because it's not easy. But the idea is that to recreate, to reproduce the green belt within the city, connecting the urban parks and the periphery of the city where the nucleus of biodiversity is nowadays. And I will move to the last slide, please, Jose. So if you want to get more information or details about this, in 2014, we published our green infrastructure strategy. That is, you can download it from the website of the City Council. Main lines of work for the next year is, as I said, to close the green belt in the south, where we have this partial intervention. We want to divert the last 2 rivers from the sewage system, creating also lamination ponds and connecting to the rivers in the periphery. The artificial one that I saw. We also want to make more interventions in what we have seen in the last slide, the interior green belt, so connecting the urban parks with the green belt, and also to invest in promoting local organic food production and consumption in the city, in what we call the agricultural belt, that those are those green areas surrounding the green belt, so just the agriculture lands in the periphery of the city. Finally, another and the last example, in Vitoria 10 years ago, we developed 2 new neighborhoods where more than 30,000 people moved to live. And due to the crisis, there was a lot of vacant plots that we are not giving a transitional use using green infrastructure. And for example, the most successful one to date is the creation of an urban allotment network that is really successful. We have nowadays for allotments, and this is going to increase the next year. And always taking into account ecosystem services, trying to recover biodiversity in the city, giving a lecture option to the people to get in contact with nature, facing climate change, trying to get a better city. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Aitor. This is very impressive case study dealing with a lot of different aspects in the urban of Vitoria-Gasteiz, always taking into account natural-based solution. Okay, so we can start our discussions now. I'm going to in the screen there are several questions for you to reflect or to propose answers. First is, are the climate adapt case study useful and for what purposes? Second one is, what shall be the focus of next actions on climate adapt case study? Should we develop more cases, updating the old ones, or focus on the existing gaps? Another question is, would you like to contribute to climate adapt case study development? As you know, climate adapt is open to new providers to submit proposals regarding case studies, and how could you contribute to case study dissemination, how to disseminate this element of the platform. We hope you send your comments using the chat function, and the speakers can reflect on this feedback from your side. I would add that in the last renovation of the platform, we set up a specific web page on case study because into the evaluation, this is one of the most visited section of Climate Adapt. Yes, there is a comment or question by Aitor saying that it would be nice to have monitoring data associated to cases. And maybe Emiliano, you want to comment on this, on the activity we are developing regarding monitoring the case studies.
Yes, I think this is a very relevant comment, and this is something we have been discussing already. Now we have a collection of case studies, and for most of them we actually do not know exactly how they are performing in terms of improving resilience and adaptation to climate change. Sorry?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so one action we were thinking to put in the pipeline was to develop a simple structured format to collect information from local context of case studies about progress in improving climate change adaptation through the measures that have been implemented. That's why in my last slide I've included among the possible actions for future years the revision of case studies, providing more information, knowledge, if available, on the achieved and expected benefits of implemented measures, hopefully based on real monitoring, as for example I was discussing for the Send Motor case study. In some cases might exist monitoring data that allows to verify the success or even the obstacles which have been affected the case study the implementation of the measures and their effect.
Okay, thank you, Emiliano. There was a comment from Lucia. Agree with Aitor comments. Not only the measurement itself, but also the investment is an interesting point to monitor, of course. There are comments from my colleague Sergio Castellari. He's here in my office in the same room, saying that it's key to increase the number of case studies, but it's also very relevant to continue the assessment of the existing gaps. And some proposals for the dissemination, select some of them and presenting when we address, for example, natural-based solution at urban level. Yeah. Also, Claire asked what is the target audience of case study. I can say that the target audience of Climate Adapt are decision makers that are working in the adaptation field at all levels, national levels, regional, transnational, local, and all the experts that are supporting this process of decision making. So case study target audience are also this profile of users, but Claire mentioned that it should reach also a wide public. Yes, also the wide public is can be benefited by this case study. Yeah, Emiliano, maybe you can have some comments on this last.
Yeah, about the. Sorry, guys, we have an airplane show over the city of Venice, so you might hear some strange noise. No, that's becoming complex to me. Coming to Sergio's comment, this is about the importance to assess existing gaps. This is exactly what we attempt to do every year, to develop new cases based on major gaps. In a way that we keep constantly our work in closing the gaps, and I find very interesting the suggestion to disseminate some of the urban case studies dealing with nature-based solutions, and I guess there are a number of events which are dedicated to the issue that could be used to capitalize the examples from Climate Adapt. And about the audience, I haven't much to add. I think that the primary audience is the one you described, Jose, but we know that there is a wider audience of Climate Adapt and even case study, and this was even somehow testified by the small survey we did, and I mentioned in my presentation, which revealed that case studies are used for a very wide range of different purposes. For example, including training and research, which we know research are not the specific and very targeted users of Climate Adapt, but this information is also used by them. So there is a primary target audience and a wider audience which we refer to.
Yes. Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I was saying that we have reached the time for closing the seminar. So I would like to again thank you, all of you, for your participation. I will also propose you, if you have additional comments, suggestions, feedback, to provide them by email to the Climate Adapt inbox or directly to myself, because we really appreciate this feedback and they are very valuable for us to further develop the platform. Case study, our flagship of Climate Adapt. We want maybe one of the most important elements in the platforms, illustrating how Europe is implementing adaptation options. So we want to further develop these elements, and we really appreciate your feedback and input. Yeah, there is some additional comments from Uxia, how they were chosen to be on Climate Adapt platform. Is there any criteria? Yes, and she mentioned the Spanish case, development of some case study. Okay, maybe Emiliano, you can close with reviewing the criteria for our case studies in the lab, and we are open to external proposals of case studies.
Yes, in the presentation I mentioned the criteria we used. So just to briefly recall them, they shall describe measures which are either implemented or concretely under implementation. There must be a clear link to climate change adaptation, and must be the possibility to have access to more detailed information. We applied these criteria to find some illustrative histories representative of different contexts in Europe. We means a group of thematic experts that works within the topic center on climate change, impact, vulnerability, and adaptation. So basically, the case studies which are currently included in Climate Adapt comes from our knowledge of initiatives going out around Europe, and which fulfill the selecting criteria. But surely we are very much open, and we are also working with the so-called external submitters of case studies to provide space in Climate Adapt for their initiatives on climate change adaptation. And I must say that a good number of case studies comes from live projects, have been initiated by live projects around Europe, and have been then taken up by local, regional administrations in their daily work, and continuing the work even after the project, the live project specifically, ended. So you're really welcome to put in contact with us and suggest us new case studies.
Okay, so I think we can close the webinar now. Again, thank you very much for all your interest and participation. And just to announce that we are thinking to organize the next webinar in autumn, focused on urban tools for adaptation, the urban adaptation support tool and the urban adaptation map viewer that are in Climate Adapt. So you will have information on this webinar in the platform in coming weeks and months. Thank you very much to all of us. Thank you.